The second European explorer to visit Hawaii, and the first to come ashore on the island of Maui, was the French explorer Jean-Francois Lapérouse. He was the first to chart Niihau and the Leeward Islands some 1,500 miles northwest of Kauai. The third major expedition to Hawaii was led by the English explorer Captain George Vancouver, who visited the islands between 1792 and 1794. Having traveled to the Pacific on both the second and third voyages with Captain Cook, the young Vancouver was one of the most qualified and experienced English officers to command a voyage to the Pacific with the specific purpose of settling a dispute in Nuka Sound and finishing what Cook had started, searching for the highly publicized Northwest Passage. His was the only expedition to completely circumnavigate all of the islands of the chain. Vancouver's voyage resulted in the first published map of Hawaii depicting the islands in their entirety. This landmark work, credited to Joseph Baker, remained the basic map of Hawaii for nearly 80 years, though some of the errors found in this chart were corrected by later map makers. American activities in the islands were not limited to those of seafarers and scientists. U.S. missionaries, who were to be a major force in Hawaii for more than a century, arrived in 1820. Upon their arrival, they realized that they had to first translate the Hawaiian language before they could teach the natives to read the Bible. With this motivation, and led by Calvinist missionaries such as Hiram Bingham, the Hawaiian language was translated into the present-day 12-letter alphabet. By 1831, they had opened a school for native Hawaiians at Lahaina Luna on Maui. Here, the island's first printing presses were set up and the first maps of the islands engraved by Hawaiians were created. Large-scale scientific investigation in Hawaii began with the visit of the United States Exploring Expedition in 1840. This expedition, which also visited many other parts of the Pacific, was under the command of Lieutenant Charles Wilkes. Another major accomplishment from his expedition was the first-time mapping of the Hawaii volcanoes, including the summit of Mauna Loa, the crater of Kilauea on the Big Island, and Haleakala on Maui. By the mid-19th century, Hawaii was firmly established on the maps of the world, but mapping of its own geographic features was entirely another story. In old Hawaii, kings awarded custody of lands to their loyal supporters. Island kingdoms, mokupunai, were divided into districts, moku, which were further parceled into minor chiefdoms, ahupua'a. Because boundaries with neighboring ahupua'a were not crossed with impunity, these land divisions typically extended from the high forested mountains to offshore fishing grounds, providing the residents with access to resources of all elevations without crossing borders. Within each ahupua'a were ili, or smaller holdings, each typically worked by one extended family. Throughout the Hawaiian Islands, the names of moku and some ahupua'a are preserved as geographic areas. Land did not pass by inheritance. What the Crown gave, it could also take back or reassign to others. Because land was immortal and humans mortal, the idea that humans could own land was beyond imagining. Their attitude was one of territorial custody rather than ownership. It was said that land could not belong to men because men belonged to the land. In his 1840 Constitution of the Kingdom of Hawaii, Kamehameha III stated that although his father was founder of the kingdom, the land was not his own private property. It belonged to the chiefs and people in common, of whom Kamehameha I was the head. To no one's surprise, Americans and other foreign residents of Hawaii found this system unfamiliar, and especially unfavorable to their own business plans. Foreign advisors to the monarchy eventually persuaded the king to allow private land ownership. The first land division in 1848 was termed the Great Mahele. In 1850, it was expanded to permit private ownership of land by non-Hawaiians. The upshot was that the king retained some land for himself and distributed most of the rest to his chiefs. The chiefs and the ordinary people did not fully understand the differences between the old and new systems. Soon, significant amounts of land were purchased by foreign interests. Eventually, the Great Mahele did produce surveys and surveyors who attempted to record the actual detailed geographic features of the islands. By the 1880s, the Alexander surveys recorded all the islands as government documents. These colorful survey maps of Hawaii are notable both for their engaging detail as well as the way they show many of the original grants made under the monarchy system. The rise of tourism in the islands prior to World War II spurred another kind of map making. These were mainly decorative illustrated maps created for souvenirs. Printed in many colorful styles, they were often issued by hotels, shipping lines, or private companies, and helped to popularize knowledge of Hawaii. Very popular were the series of cartoon maps by Ruth Taylor White. Stylized views published by Dole Pineapple were also geographically appealing. Many maps from these years bear the initials TH for Territory of Hawaii. The bombing of Pearl Harbor on December 7, 1941, and the entry of the United States into the war made Hawaii an important strategic outpost in the Pacific. Maps from this period show the islands in relation to the movement of ships, planes, and troops. While these are not as rare or expensive as some of the early maps of Hawaii, they are eagerly sought by collectors of World War II memorabilia. Alaska and Hawaii achieved statehood in 1959. Important events in cartographic terms because it meant that all maps of the U.S. had to be altered. Since both of the new states were far from the mainland, common practice, even to this day, was to include both areas as insets on existing maps. Often this led to some confusion because Hawaii is almost never shown in correct scale or in the correct geographic relationship to the North American continent. Finally, at the end of the 20th century, other new technological developments resulted in computer simulations that helped predict the weather, tides, storms, waves, and other activities on land, air, and sea near the islands. Perhaps the most important new tool in mapmaking, one not yet fully utilized, are three-dimensional build-out maps of cities like Honolulu. Using these advanced computer techniques, planners and residents can better visualize and appreciate the impact of ever-increasing development throughout Hawaii.